Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned for my reading report. Which is no longer the weekend reading report. Now it's just a reading report on Monday. Oh well. It is what it is, but I'm still going to be talking about all the stuff that I read last week, the previous week, the week with Christmas in it. Let's talk about that week. Okay. I did read some stuff. I didn't finish very much. I finished one book for the 500 book challenge. The challenge where I have to read 500 books that I own before I will buy any new ones. It just keeps going on. And this past week I finished book number 207. And this is a book that I had picked up, read a bit of, and put down, but I finished it this past week, and it was awesome. It was this one. This is Adventures into Terror, the Atlas Comics Library Volume 1, which is a series of very nice hardcover books that are coming out now. And they're actually being published by Fantagraphics Press, Fantagraphics Books. And Marvel has licensed the Atlas comics for them to publish in these very nice hardcovers. Basically, Atlas Comics, that was Marvel Comics back in the 50s, before Marvel started doing superheroes again. And so this is a period when they were doing every kind of comic except superhero comics, basically. You had science fiction comics, war comics, horror comics, all kinds of stuff. And as comic books, they were not nearly as good as EC Comics, EC, which was the greatest comic book company of all time. And they were very popular in the early 1950s. These comics aren't as good as those, but they are pretty fantastic in their own way. Really entertaining stuff with some cool artwork, crazy stuff going on, people being turned into lizards. Awesome. It was fun. This was a fun book. These horror comics, they wrote these comics really, really quickly. So like any idea that came into their head, they were just like, okay, we'll just write a comic book about it, no matter how ridiculous it is. And some of these stories are pretty ridiculous, but they're also frequently very imaginative and very strange. And like this poor fella is being turned into a human bomb. He's been turned into a human bomb. He's going to explode. Wham! So, bad day for this guy. And pretty much everybody that was in town with him. It's fun stuff. So I read this, had a great time with it. I'm looking forward to reading the other Atlas Library books. I got the first few of them that I ordered before the comics became part of the 500 book challenge. But yeah, this was great. So yeah, Adventures into Terror. I do recommend this book if you're interested in comic books from this period. Don't expect it, like I said, don't expect these to be as good as EC Comics because they're not, but they are fun. They're a lot of fun. And like I said, very often imaginative and interesting and with some really pretty cool artwork in it. So there you go. That's the first book, Adventures into Terror. That's the one book that I finished. It is not the only thing that I read, though. I read a lot this week. For Christmas, of course, it was Cthulhu Christmas. And on Cthulhu Christmas, you have to read a story by H.P. Lovecraft to properly celebrate the holiday, which I did. I am in the process of going through all of Lovecraft, and I am reading this right now. This is the collected fiction of H.P. Lovecraft. This is a Ver Aurum edition. And this is volume 2, 1926 to 1930. It's a beautiful book from Hippocampus Press. They did a wonderful job on these volumes. So what I read on Christmas Day was The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, which is a fantasy novel that H.P. Lovecraft wrote as a kind of practice novel. He wanted to see if he could stretch out a story to novel length. And Dream Quest is a short novel. He never attempted to have it published anywhere. It was basically just, like he said, a practice novel. It was an exercise. But it is really, really interesting. It is highly underrated, I think. His idea of a fantasy novel has a lot of horror in it. It takes place in the Dreamlands. It is one of his dream stories, which is a kind of a fantasy world that you can go to in your dreams. And it is kind of a shared dreamland. Different dreamers can go to this place. It's really cool for a lot of reasons. It's highly episodic. You have different little episodes of different horrific fantasy scenes with different monsters. And, we learn a lot of interesting things. Like, we learn a lot of interesting scientific information about cats, for example. When you can't find your cat, they're on the moon. That's where cats go when you can't find them. They're on the moon. And, Randolph Carter, which is a recurring character in H.P. Lovecraft stories. He is the main character of Dream Quest, and he goes to the moon with the cats, he has some interesting times. And we have like all kinds of other horrible creatures. My favorites, of course, are the ghouls who make a return in Dream Quest. The ghouls we met in Pickman's Model, which is a great short story, which many of you have probably read because it's been anthologized frequently, Pickman's Model, and been adapted many times into comic books and television episodes and things like that. But Pickman, the star of Pickman's Model, makes a return in that story, Dream Quest, and it's awesome. Spoiler alert, Pickman becomes a ghoul. And he is very high up in the hierarchy of ghouls. And Randolph Carter is friends with Pickman and friends with the ghouls. One thing this story will tell you is how valuable it is to make friends. Because Randolph Carter's friends help him out a lot. Even the ghouls, So it's cool. It's a lot of fun. I love it, Dream Quest. I think I probably enjoy it more every time I read it. So I read that on Christmas, which was quite appropriate. Not technically a Cthulhu mythos, but that's kind of an artificial term anyway that was invented after H.P. Lovecraft passed away. He never came up with the idea of the Cthulhu mythos. That was August Derleth. All of his stories, all of H.P. Lovecraft's stories are interconnected in one way or another. So, yeah, this was awesome. This was fun, a fun Christmas. And I read, other stories in here too. The Silver Key was in here. Pickman's Model came before that. Call of Cthulhu, of course. So I've got a lot left to go on this. I'll probably finish this week because I should have more time this week than I did last week. Last week was particularly busy. But yeah, I read this. And I read some other stuff. Of course, Varney the Vampire. I moaned about Varney the Vampire yesterday in my video that I did yesterday. But yeah, Varney the Vampire, going right along. Varney's trying to get married. Good luck, Varney. Not a lot has happened other than that. Other than Varney is impersonating a baron. Now he's calling himself a baron. He's under an assumed identity, and he's trying to marry some lady that doesn't want to marry him. It's all very thrilling. Hopefully we will get some actual vampire horror action at some point in Varney. We'll see. It has to happen eventually. So yeah, continuing to read Varney. I read Varney pretty much every day at some point. So I'm reading that. I've also been reading this big guy. This is the Justice League of America Omnibus Volume 1. The Justice League, which originally showed up in the Brave and the Bold, right? That was the first Justice League story, was in the Brave and the Bold. Let me see, yeah, the Brave and the Bold. This is the very first appearance of the Justice League when they're all battling Starro. And this is a lot of fun. These stories were all written by Gardner Fox, who, I mean, he comes up with some fantastic plots, Gardner Fox. And so these are very, very plot-heavy stories. I've mentioned before that the personalities of the superheroes in these early Justice League comics are pretty much interchangeable. The only person in these stories that has any real personality is Snapper Carr, who is probably the most annoying sidekick in all of comicdom. Snapper Carr. He snaps his fingers and he's an idiot. But otherwise, the Justice League, they're all just super good guys, and they all have the same personality. But the plots are really, really imaginative, often very complex and a lot of fun. I haven't gotten very far. I read the Brave and the Bold issues. I read the first issue of their own comic book. And now I've got issue number 2 to read and all the rest. But this is going to be fun. This is going to be a good time. These early Justice League. So I'm going to be reading all of the Silver Age Justice League. I've decided. And I have them in a couple omnibus volumes, that being one. I am also reading every issue of the Fantastic Four from the first run of the Fantastic Four, which ran from 1961 to 1996, right? And this is volume 10 of the Epic Collections. This also collects issues of comics that are Fantastic Four adjacent. So that includes certain issues of Marvel 2-in-1 starring The Thing, which is where I'm at now. We have the Liberty Legion. Now, the Liberty Legion is a group of old-timey superheroes that existed in the golden age of comics that Roy Thomas decided to put into a super team called the Liberty Legion to fight the evil Axis powers. We've got a giant swastika floating through the sky, and the Thing has to battle it in this particular issue of Marvel 2-in-1. And then after that, I think we're back to the Fantastic Four's comics. And then I'll be reading issue 171 of the Fantastic Four. So I'm at issue 171 in the Fantastic Four. Rolling right along. Fantastic Four is great, man. It's great. It's really impressive how Marvel managed to maintain the quality on this comic through all of the different creator changes and everything. Roy Thomas is writing the book at this particular time. And I think the artist is, at the moment, George Perez. So George Perez, I think, does a number of issues in here, and then he's replaced by John Buscema, who returns to the book. But the artwork is great in Fantastic Four, and had been from the very start with Jack Kirby. So this continues to be awesome. I'm continuing to read that. Also, I'm reading this electronically, so I'll throw a picture up into space here. I'm reading Astounding. I decided to read Astounding. I have a number of issues of Astounding. Actually, I have every issue of Astounding in one way or another. Most of them electronically. Although, I don't think I have a physical copy of Astounding until the 50s. I might have a couple 1940s issues physically. But otherwise, I have them all electronically. And I decided, you know what, I'm gonna start reading these, I had started for a while, and then I stopped. And I started reading some 1950s issues. But I said, you know what, I'm going to read this from the start. Why not? So I decided to read the first issue of Astounding, and I just started it last night because last night I decided, I'm going to read these. And this is the first issue, which is unusual in that it's this is when Astounding first started. It's very pulpy. It's very pulpy. The first story is about giant beetles. Sort of reminds me of an Adventures into Terror story. But it's not. It's astounding science fiction, or what became astounding science fiction. It's going to be fun. This is going to be a fun thing to do. So I just started reading this. I will finish this probably in a few days. Hopefully, if all goes well. And I'll talk more about this first issue of Astounding next Monday. But yeah, I'm just going to be reading these Astounding because why not? I have them. I should read them. And yeah, giant beetles, man. You can't beat giant beetles. So I'm reading that, and this is going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to read all these original old magazines. And I have them all, and I'm going to count them as books for the 500 book challenge. They're over 100 pages, so, why not? Why not, Roger? Why not? Anyway, so I read Astounding, and the next things I'm going to read after I finish this, I'm going to take a little break from H.P. Lovecraft, and before I get back to it, I'm going to read a couple books that I have determined to read in January. One of those is this, The Voyage of the Space Beagle by A.E. Van Vogt. I'm going to read this. And then Doc Savage. I'm going to be reading the first 12 issues of Doc Savage this year. This being the very first Doc Savage story, The Man of Bronze. So yeah, I'm going to be reading that. I think that's all I have for this week. Department of Corrections. I did make an error yesterday in the video that I made because I forgot to mention for one of the events I'll be doing this year, Sumerian September. I forgot to mention Sumerian September, and a lot of my viewers were outraged. They're like, "You're not doing Sumerian September, you bastard!" No, we are doing it. I do these videos early, man, and I can't remember everything because I haven't had my coffee yet. So yeah, I am doing Sumerian September this year, of course. So yeah, have no fear. Sumerian September will return. And okay, now that's everything. I will shut up now, and I will catch you next time.